Hey guys, this is your host Thomas Tyree here from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be episode number 200 for you guys today. We have hit our 200th episode for the podcast. This is a small milestone for things that hopefully come for the podcast, but this is going to be episode number 200 for you guys today. And to kick off this week's episode, I'll be discussing my own March Madness summary thus far of the two rounds of round 64 through 32, and I'll be going over the games that caught my eye and which team I do believe is the best team heading into the Sweet 16 in the men's March Madness tournament. So starting off with one of the games that caught my eye, it was Arkansas versus St. John's, with Arkansas defeating St. John's by a score of 75-66. Now this was a legendary coaching matchup between Rick Pitino and John Calipari. That was a really good game. Several decades of college basketball March Madness battles between the two respective coaches. Both of these coaches have won national titles and have done a really remarkable job with several programs over the years in college basketball. But Arkansas defeated St. John's to pull off the upset here, out hustling St. John's for the majority of the game, made them feel uncomfortable. And St. John's was arguably the best defensive team in the country, but Arkansas had their own taste, gave them their own taste of their medicine by giving them their own defensive fits. They had them uncomfortable shooting from the field. St. John shot 28% from the field. St. John had a lot of players in foul trouble as well in this ball game. But the story of the game was the final 5 minutes of the game, that final sequence where Rick Pitino benched his best player and R.J. Lewis with 5 minutes left in the ball game. Yes, R.J. had 9 points. He shot the ball 3 for 17 from the field, had a really bad game. But if anybody is going to have their best player, if you're down at this particular situation by a total of 2-3 points with 5 minutes to go, you want your best player in the game, regardless of the shooting percentages that he's having throughout the game or the bad shooting night that he's having. You live and die by your best players giving you the best chance to win ball games. So when he had him on the bench for 5 minutes of the final 5 minutes of the game, it was a head scratcher to a lot of people around the country watching. But John Calipari gets the best of Rick Pitino in this battle. And John Calipari has Arkansas in his first year there going to the Sweet 16. Arkansas is known for being a football team out in the SEC conference. John Calipari has got this team to the Sweet 16. And yes, the SEC is the story of March Madness because there are not a lot of Cinderella stories. There's several teams that have made the Sweet 16 in the SEC conference, but nobody saw John Calipari in his first year with Arkansas after he left Kentucky last year being a part of this run and knocking out a team like St. John's, being a 10th seed in round 32. So you got to give him credit there, but that was a really remarkable game and probably the biggest upset of round 32 because a lot of people had St. John's going pretty far in this tournament. A lot of people picked them to go to the Final Four, or hell, a lot of people even picked them to be their national champions. But Arkansas pulled off the upset, and I thought that game caught my eye. That was a really fun game, seeing that legendary coaching matchup as well Saturday. Next game was Houston versus Gonzaga. You had Houston defeat Gonzaga by a score of 81-76. Now, I thought this matchup between Houston and Gonzaga was a really good ball game. Great shooting all around, very competitive game throughout the two halves of this basketball game. LJ Cryer stepped up for Houston, having the best college performance of his college career thus far, scoring 30 points, hit 2 clutch free throws under 15 seconds to go in this ball game. So Gonzaga, everybody knows they are a team that goes far in March Madness. But this year they had an unfortunate draw because they were the 8th seed in this region, playing the number 1 seed in Houston. That was the number 1 seed in the Midwest. So this is actually the first time that Gonzaga has missed the Sweet 16 since 2014. A legendary program that is known for the basketball, but they unfortunately had a bad draw this year and will not make the Sweet 16, and they are eliminated from March Madness. But, overall, a pretty good game. Next game that caught my eye was Sunday, the matchup in round 32. You have Florida versus the the reigning defending national champions, and UConn. Florida won a really tight ball game, 77 to 75. Now, I thought this was a really entertaining game between the Florida Gators and the UConn Huskies. Now, this was a really good game. Oh, excuse me. UConn fought hard trying to three-peat, but Dan Hurley and his program, unfortunately, will not be able to three-peat. And they've been the best team in college basketball. It just was not their year, and they lost a lot of remarkable talent that was a part of those back-to-back championship teams over the years. So, again, this is another scenario where a really talented team in UConn in the West region, an 8th seed, fell into the laps of the number 1 seeded Florida Gators. And the final 10 minutes of this ball game was an absolute cinema. I mean, Walter Clayton Jr. hitting some clutch 3-point shots, scored 13 out of this 23 points in the final 10 minutes of the ball game. Really contributed offensively to help Florida escape with the victory in round 32 instead of being upset by the UConn Huskies. This is the first time that the Florida Gators will advance to the Sweet 16 since 2017. So the Gators, this is the best that I've seen this program in years. And what they've done so far in March Madness, they were my pick to win it all. But based off of what I've seen, having to overcome adversity and fight back into a ball game like they did against UConn, I think they still got a chance to win March Madness. So I was really impressed by the performance that Florida Gators had against UConn. And probably which was the game of the weekend was Maryland taking on Colorado State. Maryland defeated Colorado State by a score of 72 to 71 in a really tight ball game. Now, this was the best game of the tournament so far between Maryland and Colorado State. That game displayed what March Madness is truly all about. And Jalen Lake for Colorado State was as hot as a forest fire throughout that game. Drilled an insane 3-point shot and looked like that was going to be the clutch shot that was going to help Colorado State go to their first Sweet 16 since 1969. Until Derek Queen showed why he is a potential lottery pick for the NBA draft, this upcoming NBA draft this summer. And with 3 seconds to spare, Derek Queen hit a clutch fadeaway shot. And I was watching that game. I was screaming at the TV, bad look, bad angle, because the way how Derek Queen cut to the basket, it didn't look like he was going to be able to get a clean shot off. A buzzer beater is what the Maryland Terps needed, and he provided the Terps with that shot. That's probably one of the most iconic shots in Maryland Terps basketball and their program's history because of how iconic that fadeaway shot was. A buzzer beater, the only buzzer beater in March Madness tournament thus far in the men's bracket this year. And I gotta say, that was one hell of a game, one hell of a show. And I know Colorado State was gutted because with 3 seconds to spare, they were up in the ball game, about to go to the first Sweet 16 since 1969, until Derek Queen hit that clutch fadeaway shot. But this Maryland Terps team, I had them going to the Sweet 16. And this will be their first Sweet 16 appearance since 2016. And I said to you guys last week, I didn't give you guys my bracket this year, but I said to you guys last week that Florida versus Maryland, if they match up in the Sweet 16, which I filled out on my bracket, that matchup would feed families and go down as one of the best matchups in March Madness this year. And I'm going to get to that in the next segment. But hats off to the Terps for winning that ball game. Now, before we end the segment, the most impressive team that stood out to me during March Madness in the first 2 rounds, round 64 and round 32, that would have to go to Duke. Now, I would say Duke has looked like the most impressive team so far. They're playing great team basketball. They're playing great in transition. Nearly blew out Mount St. Mary's, the 16th seed in their region, by nearly 50 points in round 64. And then they blew out Baylor on Sunday by 23 points. So they have steamrolled their first 2 opponents with ease in March Madness. And that's how dominant you want to look as a number 1 seed, with the best player in the country, Cooper Flagg, being a part of your team. He's healthy. Cooper Flag looks great so far in this tournament, coming back from that ankle injury that sidelined him during the ACC Championship tournament. But Cooper Flag is obviously the undisputed #1 pick in the NBA draft. This upcoming NBA draft, I mean, he looks good. He's a good mid-range shooter, creates separation to get to the basket, attacks the paint well. So I gotta say, Duke looks like the best teams thus far and the team to beat so far in March Madness. But those are the games that caught my eye the most in March Madness so far, during March Madness so far, and round 64 and round 32 in the first two rounds of the men's college basketball tournament.